Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the Webby-nominated podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Please also check out my other podcast, Kids Do Have Time to Read Books. I'm on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books and at Kids Do Have Time to Read. So please follow me. And if at any time you have suggestions, my email is zibby@zibbyowens.com. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much to my latest sponsor, the Mermaid Pillow Company, mermaidpillowco.com. They make these amazing pillows with sequins on the back and positive messages on the front, and they now even make custom pillows and blankets. It's an amazing company, and if you enter the code ZIBBY, Z-I-B-B-Y, you will get 10% off, which is super cool. So please check them out, mermaidpillowco.com. I'm excited to be here today with Amanda Stern. Amanda is the author of A Little Panic, Dispatches from an Anxious Life, a memoir about her undiagnosed childhood panic disorder that takes place in New York City in the Etan Patz era. She's also written The Long Haul and 11 children's books written under pseudonyms. She's the founder of the Happy Ending Music and Reading Series, which was a multidisciplinary literary event series that took place at Joe's Pub and Symphony Space in New York. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the New York Times Magazine, and the New York Times Book Review, among many other publications. She also writes the Little Panic blog on her website. Amanda currently lives in Brooklyn with her dog, Busy. Welcome, Amanda. Thanks for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.
Thanks for having me.
So can you please tell listeners what Little Panic is about, although it really kind of tells it from the subtitle, Dispatches from an Anxious Life, but that's only a small piece of the puzzle. So tell us about the book.
Sure. So Little Panic is a memoir about growing up with an undiagnosed panic disorder in Greenwich Village in the 70s, around the time that Etan Patz went missing. And it's about how not knowing what was wrong with me shaped the course of my entire life and the ways in which the adults in my life tried to go about figuring out what was going on with me. And in their attempts to figure that out, inadvertently, can I curse on here?
Go for it.
Fucked me up.
Yeah, there you go. And I love how you did it because you started the narrative when you were very, very young and went all through the school age years. But then at the same time, you had a more present day. And I kept waiting for them to meet up. I'm like, when are we going to meet? I kept waiting to see what would happen. So it was really neat how you did that.
Oh, thank you.
I thought. What made you write this book? In the acknowledgments, you said you avoided writing the book for a decade, and then it took you 4 difficult years to write it. And then even at the end, you were like, thank God I'm done. I never want to see you again.
Yeah.
So is that how you felt? Like what made you? It sounded like you had to do it, even though you didn't want to.
I did. My body was forced me to do it. Essentially what happened was I was working on my next novel. So my first novel came out in 2003, and then I started to write.
And that was The Long Haul?
That was The Long Haul. And then I started to write my next book, and it was about intelligence testing and took place in the 50s, uptown, and it was about a group of psychologists who were trying to come up with the most comprehensive intelligence test known to man. And they decided to test on all the Upper East Side school kids. And it was about how they inadvertently fucked them up. And so as I was writing it, I was like, this is very familiar. And I mean, obviously I knew what I was doing, but it didn't feel honest. And it wasn't working in some fundamental way for me. A couple other people had read it and they were like, this is wildly ambitious. And, you're tackling these topics that you may know something about, but only one aspect of it.
Right.
So I realized, it's not, something about it just wasn't working for me. So I started again, and a different novel. I just started writing a different novel. And this one was me, a memoir about me as a child, and coupled with a fictional story about diagnostic testing.
Okay.
So I was I was dancing around this topic that I somehow knew I needed to write, but was afraid to do it. So what I did instead was I thought, well, I'm just going to keep going on the second novel, and I'm going to cheat on all of these projects and write my own story down privately and just get it out. And so
I love that you perceive it as cheating.
Yeah,
and like you're the one in charge of all the projects.
I know, but you have a relationship with them.
Yeah.
No,
I understand.
Yeah.
It's just such a funny way to think about it.
No, I really, every time if I have a project and I'm leaving it for a week, I feel guilty. I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to leave you. going to be alone. Here's some hummus and crackers. No, I just, I develop a real relationship with the project. So I did feel like I was cheating on it. And I started to write my own story out. And I had all this material, this source material that I had wanted to work with in the first novel, which was about all the evaluations that I had growing up from diagnostic testing. So I wanted to use this source material. So for my own story that I started to write out, I used all the source material and started to create this sort of collage piece. And I just got really into it and wrote about 100 pages of it until I realized, oh, wait a second, I think this is the project. So I showed the first 100 pages to my agent, and he said, this is the project. So that is how I, found my way to writing the real story and being honest about it. And everything felt, it felt right. It felt like it was something that I could manage, and it wasn't overly ambitious. Yeah. Right. So I'm get overwhelmed talking about it.
It's a lot. You fit a lot in there. And I loved it. Now it makes sense to me, because I was going to ask later why you had included the pages of the reports that you had gotten about yourself. Yeah. And now that you're talking about it this way, there were a lot of scenes from all the testing. But it made total sense within the context of the book. So I wouldn't even have known that that's how it had started.
Yeah, it all started because of this folder that my mom had given me that I didn't even know existed. When I was in my 30s, she handed it to me and said, do you want this folder? And I said, well, what is it? And I opened it, and inside there were all the test results and all the evaluations from my entire childhood.
And part of what you keep saying after you do every single test in this book is I don't know how I did again.
Right.
Did I get that answer right or not? This feeling of sort of unfinished, unsettling test taking for your whole life.
Yeah, it was really unresolved. Yeah. I mean, so just for the listeners. So I ended up I was sort of sent on a 10-year testing odyssey, and I underwent all these different series of IQ tests from ages 11 to 19, which is not 10 years, but I'm rounding up. And I never knew why I was taking the tests. I never knew what the results of the tests were. I didn't know what the diagnoses were. And so I didn't know that my mom was receiving these evaluations. And so when she handed me the folder at 35 and said, do you want these? I was like, this is the answer to my entire life is in your hands.
Were you angry?
I wasn't angry when she gave me the folder because I hadn't looked through it yet. I mean, I knew what it was, but I hadn't read it. So I brought it home, and it was only once I started to read them that I became angry, because every single evaluation mentioned anxiety. Mm. And it took me a while to reconcile that, that.
How did they miss it?
Well, how did they miss it? Or to me, it was more not how did they miss it? It felt intentional, because I was angry. Mm-hmm. So when you're angry, you sort of misapply some of your thinking. And so I was reading it and was thinking, it's so obvious. It's all right there. Why did they ignore it? That was the way that I processed the whole thing. And then it took a little while to realize, no, they were looking for something, and we didn't have the language, to talk about it then. No one really had the vocabulary. People weren't constantly saying their kid had ADD or, panic and anxiety disorders. It just wasn't, in our conversational, palette. So I got over it. But I was angry, originally.
It's really hard to believe that it's not that long ago. I mean, it's really not, it's just, right?
I mean, to me, it feels like, I feel like I'm, 1,000. So it does feel like a long time ago. But yeah, it wasn't that long ago. The interesting thing is that while it feels like it was so long ago, that when I was writing this book, I thought, is this relevant anymore? It's so dated. I feel so dated.
Oh my gosh.
But I really felt
so
that.
Relevant.
Well, right. But I didn't know that because I hadn't been going around yet to schools and talking to parents. And I was writing in a bubble inside of this void in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, in my apartment with my dog. And so there was a bit of, I was slightly mortified writing it and feeling like this is so obvious. Everyone knows this, da-da-da. But when I started to go to the schools and was talking to parents and they would tell me things about what they were doing, I realized, wait a minute, what? so much time has passed between the time I was a child and now, and we haven't learned how to do this. I thought we had the language to identify the issue, which we do, but we haven't yet come up with a way to address it at home or to resolve it, in our families. So it's just been a really, really interesting dynamic, to feel sort of ashamed and dated and then going into the world and be like, oh, wait, you don't know this.
Right. Doesn't it feel kind of validate, like that it was worth sharing? The pain that you went through has some greater good?
Absolutely.
Like that you're helping all these people now?
Oh, yeah. That's amazing. That feels amazing. But it also breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that it has taken this long, that I'm now an adult. I'm no longer, a 4-year-old child who's suffering, but, a 400-year-old adult who is now dealing with all these other kids and parents who are in the exact same place. And it just really breaks my heart.
And then had you known earlier, you might have been able to avoid some of the more like self-destructive type things that you pick up in the book.
Probably. Well,
sort
maybe,
of like self-medicating. It was really self-medicating.
Yeah.
How you had to cope because there was no other way.
Right.
Like I feel like a lot of kids with anxiety used to drinking or drugs or whatever, you had to like find a way out.
Yeah.
And now everybody is medicated, so it's, although I'm wondering about the correlation of drinking and drugs now. Has it gone way down because of
I doubt it.
Those medications? So maybe it's not, I don't know. Anyway.
I don't know, but I do think that so many kids, it's interesting that so many kids are medicated now, and yet we still haven't taught our parents and our teachers how to address the problems that they're being medicated for.
So what do you think parents and teachers should be doing differently? Like what's some of the more egregious mistakes you see?
I think some of the most egregious mistakes I see are removing obstacles from your children's life in order to make things easier for them. Essentially, when your job as a parent is to teach your child how to be in reality, how to face reality, how to live in the world, and how to face and overcome obstacles. And when you're removing the obstacles for your kids, you're taking away a fundamental life skill they're not learning. So that is something I see over and over and over again. And what's that name for it? It's snowplow parent? Is that it? So I just read that recently, and I thought that's pretty apt. But it's become a real phenomenon now. It's a real problem, this snowplow parenting and helicopter parenting, all of that. It's so damaging, and people don't realize it because it feels right. Mm-hmm. It feels like, you feel your best intentions. Mm-hmm. But, they're your best intentions for you,
right? But
not for your child. And it really bothers me and upsets me when I see that parents are, sort of masterminding their children's reality.
I think for some parents, I can't speak to everyone. I feel like it's this push and pull because you're trying to protect your child, right? If you see a child in distress, your instinct as a parent is to want to minimize the distress and protect your child.
Right.
But your whole thing when you went to sleepaway camp, parents are supposed to, the advice is don't avoid the things that make you so anxious.
Right.
Right? When I was reading, you stayed home from school some days, your mom would let you do that. The advice today would be send her to school, right?
Right.
They sent you to camp and you were dying over it, did not want to go, felt like your whole world was collapsing. And then you went, and the beginning was really painful, but you got over it, and then you learned. And then you had this quote at the end about how brave you were at the end. You said, "At camp, I was scared until I wasn't. I went away and didn't come back at the first sign of trouble, which means I am brave. My body made a callus around my feelings. And now I know that being scared doesn't mean staying scared. I'm tough enough to withstand anything. I'm not going back to how I was. I am brave now. I am cured. I am normal." And then a few days later,
it returned.
Yeah, all the gains are reversed.
Well, I think that, there are two parts to it. It's not just that you want to have your kid face it, that you want to eliminate your child's distress and that you want to have your kid face whatever it is that's upsetting them. It's that you want to explain to them what it is that is causing the distress and how they should handle the distress.
Give them the coping skills.
And then you send them in.
Right, not blind.
Right.
Not dumping them into the pool, not knowing how to swim.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that, that's another mistake that parents make is they think, oh, well, I'm not supposed to be removing the obstacles. I'm supposed to be throwing them in front of them. And that's not it either. Mm-hmm. So, with camp, yes, it was a good thing that I faced something, but it was too big a chunk. Mm-hmm. It was 2 months away at age 8.
I did that too.
Yeah.
I never got over it.
And I had a panic disorder. So, so it's really traumatizing.
It's really hard. Yeah.
It would be less traumatizing, and it would have been a better experience for me had I gone for 1 month and I had been given the tools and the techniques for how to get through it and for how to face something and get used to it and get through it. And it's only when you have the techniques and the tools that you can apply it. But without it, being thrown into something without, any coping skills, you're going to drown. So I just wanted to say one last thing is about, I've a couple of parents that I've talked to have said, well, when my kids get worried that they're going to get kidnapped or I'm going to die, and I say, well, what do you tell them? And they say, well, I tell them I'm not going to die, and that's ridiculous to worry about that. Nothing bad's going to happen to me. And that is, that's another huge problem. Mm-hmm. And it's not true.
Right.
You just don't know. And so I understand that they want to make their kids feel better, but it makes their kids feel worse if they don't know what to do. And kids really are just asking for life skills. They just want to know what to do in the event that something terrible happens and that they're not thrown head first into the ocean without a life jacket. All they want is the life jacket. That's all they're asking for. They're not saying, I believe you're going to die. I know you're going to die. They're just saying, hook me up with a life jacket.
That's like in the book, I felt like you kept getting frustrated with your mom when you would ask her for that and she wasn't giving you what you needed.
Right.
You had to be like, no, what do I do if I get caught, on my way to the bus? And I don't come back. What should I do? What should I do with that babysitter who takes me away?
Right. Because uncertainty is terrifying.
Yeah.
That's
true.
And the whole world is uncertain to kids. So I think it's just a parent's job to say, here are the 6 main life skills that you need to know.
So you wrote this book. Mm-hmm. You've also written a million other books somehow so you use a pseudonym and you write the Frankly Franny series. Mm-hmm. Why are you using a pseudonym for that? So I am I write adult books, which you would know because I only have 2. But in my head, and in reality, I have more than 2 because I've written many adult books. They just haven't all been published. So I started out as an adult fiction writer, and the kids' books came to me just sort of out of the blue, and they were offered to me. And I said, well, it's not anything that I do, and I'm not that interested in it. So no, I'm not gonna take on this project. And then they said, well, here's how much we could pay you. And I said, I will get to work tomorrow. So I decided that I would do it, but I would do it under a pseudonym because I didn't want to confuse my career tracks. I didn't want people to, I knew I was going to be writing 2 young adult books for this company, and I didn't want people to then think, oh, Amanda Stern, she writes kids' books, which is ultimately what ended up happening anyway, is that people are like, oh, Amanda Stern, you write kids' books, right? And I'm like, oh. So I did it under a pseudonym, and then that same editor left and went to Penguin and then called me up and said, hey, we need to fill this niche. And I was like, she said, do you have any ideas? And I said, no, I don't. I don't write kids' books. Please don't ask me. I don't want to do this anymore. What if? And I just came up with this idea on the spot and realized, I kind of do like doing this. So I ended up writing 9 books. Wow.
The Frankly Franny series. And I really loved it. But I, again, didn't want to confuse my readership of 6 people for Amanda Stern with the larger readership for kids.
My question, though, is I feel like authors need to have a platform, right? You have to go out and tour and all this stuff and Instagram and whatever.
Yeah.
How do you have a pseudonym in this day and age? Do you still use your how?
Well, I haven't written those books in a long time.
Okay, so it was long enough ago?
Yeah. The last book came out in, 2012, 2013.
It's not that long ago. Yeah, but I see what you're saying. Do you think you could do it now?
Under my own name?
Could someone decide to do that now and pull it off unless you're J.K. Rowling or something?
Yeah, in what way would they not be able to pull it off?
without having any sort of backstory or not going on podcasts or not going to book tour or not having an Instagram with their pictures. And like, I feel like there's so much surrounding each author that I meet. Like,
I see
that everyone has their own kind of face of the brand that is themselves the author. And that's like essential to sales and how many followers you have. I don't know. I just get the business of it.
I think... I don't know, because honestly, I've written so many kids' books, and yet I don't know that market. I don't know anything about it, except for, I sounded like I was Canadian just there. I don't know anything about it. But I did do press for it. I went on a book tour for You're So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah.
Right.
I did stuff for Frankly Franny. I don't think we had podcasts when
it was a silly question. I was just curious.
It's not silly at all. It's not silly at all. I just think it's a different market. Kids at that age don't listen to podcasts. I don't know. I got away with it, and I'm happy about that.
I had so many more questions, but we're like almost out of time. There was a picture of you on Instagram, speaking of Instagram, wearing headphones and saying you were doing a secret side project.
Yes.
So can you tell me anything?
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to tell you, so I'm going to.
Great.
So I've been hosting a book podcast called Bookable, where I interview an author and we do sort of a deep dive into a book, into their book. And so each episode is sort of doing an X-ray of like the DNA of the book and giving the audience an idea of the soul of the book. And it hasn't launched yet. I don't know when it's going to launch. I don't know where it's going to be hosted, but it's being produced by a company called Loud Tree Media. Now I'm really going to get in trouble.
We can delete this if you really can't say it.
I'll check afterwards. But if he's going to fire me for it, then
it's not
we'll
worth
probably delete it.
No, it's fine.
Well, I don't get paid that much, honestly. But
we still don't want you to get fired.
You're right. So anyway, yeah. So it's a book podcast. I'm interviewing authors. I don't know when it's going to launch, and it's been a whole lot of fun.
Book podcasts are the best.
They are the
best.
This is like
the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm like having the best time.
Well, you're very good at it.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure you're good at it too.
Nah, I'm okay.
Do you have any advice for aspiring authors, particularly in the memoir space?
Yes, I think I do.
Okay.
I mean, I have advice.
You have to say yes to that question.
I think I do. I have advice for authors in any, that I meant particularly to memoirs.
Okay, it doesn't have to be to memoirs, but I
have advice to all writers.
Great. Let's hear it.
Okay, my advice is, I have two pieces of advice. One, if you really feel in your soul that you're a writer, if this is what you have to do, if someone asked you whether you would write even if you knew you would never get published, and your answer is yes, then you're a writer. And you have to keep writing no matter what, and you are never to give up. You have to just keep going. If you're a writer, you write no matter what, and you do not give up. That's my big piece of advice. My other piece of advice is that if you're the kind of writer who hates writing and only likes having written, please don't say that out loud. That's it. That's it. It's my advice. It kills me when writers say that they hate writing.
I don't hear that very much.
Oh, I hear it so often.
Really?
It drives me berserk. Yeah. They're like, oh, I hate, and I don't know if it's just that they want to quote Dorothy Parker. Uh-huh. And so they're saying, I hate having written. I hate writing. I love having written, but I can't stand it. I'm like, well, no one is making you be a writer.
Right.
This is your choice. This is your privilege. Like, it's an absolute privilege. And like, no one is going to.
It's not like going to the gym.
Yeah,
it's
no one
nice
is,
to be over the run.
Right. I'm not crying for you because you hate writing, this profession that you have chosen that you get paid little for. And, you must have some other comfort in your life to allow you to do this. Like, I'm not going to feel bad for you. So stop saying it.
Okay. I hope everybody heard that.
And, drink a lot of coffee.
And then I didn't ask what's coming next. You have the podcast coming next. Are you working on another book?
I am. I started another book. It's a novel. I'm trying to write, I don't know what to call it. It's crime-ish, suspense-y. And it's like a literary crime novel, I say right now. But in 9 months, I'll be like, it's for kids. So yeah, I'm doing that. And then I'm doing the book podcast. And I've started speaking at schools and organizations and workplaces about anxiety and mental illness. And I also started a blog
Yes,
called
I mentioned that earlier.
The Little Panic blog on my website, amandastern.com. And that's been amazing. I love that. It's so much fun. And also I discovered there's a place on my website that says site statistics.
I just discovered that on Instagram.
Extremely
I had
exciting.
like a 15-year-old show me, and she's like, "Did you know you can see?" I was like, "No way."
Wait, on Instagram?
Yeah, you can see the
little
breakdown
bars
of like how many men and women and where.
What?
I'm going to show you when we turn this off.
Oh my God.
I know, it's like mind blowing to
Really?
me. Yes, I couldn't
that's
believe
so
it.
exciting. Well, every day I'm like refreshing on my, and I'm like 180.
This is going to blow your mind.
Yeah, so it's pretty great. It's all good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. It was super well written, really valuable, and just it was a labor of love, and you could tell. And I'm really glad you did it.
Thank you so much.
Just as one person reading it. So thanks for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to my sponsor, Mermaid Pillow Co. mermaidpillowco.com/Zibby. Enter code Zibby for 10% off. Thanks so much. Check out those really awesome giftable pillows and blankets. Thanks for listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. You can follow me on Instagram at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books and at Zibby Owens, and my new podcast at Kids Do Have Time to Read. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music. Thanks for listening. You could always email me at zibby@zibbyowens.com.